Get this monkey away from my table. You people need to learn your place. Victoria Whitmore's manicured fingers gripped her wine glass as she stood up at the VIP table. Without hesitation, she dumped the entire contents of red Cabernet over Damon Richardson's head. The wine streamed down his face, soaking his expensive suit, dripping onto the white tablecloth like spilled blood. "Did you really think you belonged here?" She set the empty glass down with a sharp clink, her voice dripping with disdain. The Silicon Valley Charity Gala froze. Every conversation stopped. Phones lifted, cameras rolled. She had no idea she just destroyed her family's billion-dollar empire. The man sitting there, wine dripping from his chin, wasn't some gatecrasher. He was the one person on Earth who could obliterate everything the Whitmore family had built over 3 generations. Have you ever seen someone's racism cost them absolutely everything? Let's rewind 12 hours to understand how we got here. The Tech Innovation Charity Gala was Silicon Valley's most exclusive event of the year. $1,000 per plate, invitation only, where billion-dollar deals were made over champagne and caviar. The Fairmont Hotel's grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the kind of old money that built empires. Victoria Whitmore swept through the entrance like she owned the place, and in many ways, she did. Third-generation heiress to Whitmore Industries, one of America's largest defense contractors. Her family had been building weapons for the military since World War II. Her great-grandfather started with ammunition. Her grandfather expanded into aircraft. Her father conquered missile systems. Now it was her turn to carry the legacy. But there was a problem. Whitmore Industries was bleeding money. 3 major contracts had fallen through in the past year. The Pentagon was shifting toward newer, more innovative contractors. Companies that understood modern warfare, drone technology, cyber defense, the future of combat. James Whitmore, Victoria's husband and CEO, knew they needed a miracle. A massive new contract to keep the company afloat. Something worth at least $1 billion. "Tomorrow's announcement could save us," James had whispered to Victoria in the car. "The Defense Innovation Unit is finally revealing their next major contractor. If we get that UAV deal, we're set for the next decade." Victoria barely listened. She was more focused on making sure everyone at the gala knew exactly where she stood in the social hierarchy. As the evening progressed, Victoria's behavior became a masterclass in casual cruelty. She sent her champagne back twice, claiming the Latino server had dirty hands. She loudly questioned whether the black valet had actually graduated high school. When a young Asian woman tried to network with her, Victoria suggested she'd be better suited for the kitchen staff. Each comment was delivered with a smile that never reached her eyes. But Victoria's real target hadn't arrived yet. When Damon Richardson walked into the ballroom at 8:47 p.m., Victoria noticed him immediately. Not because he stood out, quite the opposite. He moved with quiet confidence, his tailored navy suit impeccable, his posture military straight. He looked like he belonged, and that infuriated her. "Who invited him?" Victoria whispered to her friend Margaret, a rail-thin socialite who collected charity board positions like designer handbags. Margaret shrugged. "No idea. Probably some diversity quota thing." Victoria watched Damon make his way through the crowd. People seemed to know him, shaking his hand with genuine respect. Business cards were exchanged. Conversations flowed naturally. He wasn't networking desperately like the climbers Victoria was used to dismissing. He was being courted. This was wrong. All wrong. "James," Victoria grabbed her husband's arm. "Do you know that man? The one by the silent auction table?" James squinted across the room. "Which one?" "The black one, in a navy suit. Someone needs to check his invitation. Victoria, please, not tonight. We can't afford any incidents." But Victoria had already made up her mind. Throughout dinner, she kept glancing at Damon's table. He was seated with 3 Pentagon officials and 2 tech executives she recognized from Forbes covers. The conversation looked serious, strategic, like they were discussing something important, something that should have included her family's company. "Excuse me," Victoria finally stood up, wine glass in hand. "I think there's been some kind of mistake with the seating arrangements." The room was about to learn exactly what Victoria Whitmore thought about black people who dared to sit at tables meant for their betters. What Victoria didn't know was that Damon Richardson had been taking notes all evening. Not just on her behavior, but on her character, her treatment of the staff, her casual cruelty toward anyone she deemed beneath her station. He'd been conducting an evaluation, and Victoria Whitmore was failing spectacularly. As she approached his table, wine glass raised like a weapon, Damon remained perfectly calm. He'd faced down enemy combatants in 3 different war zones. He'd negotiated with hostile governments. He'd been tested by prejudice his entire career. But he'd never met anyone quite like Victoria Whitmore. Someone so confident in her superiority that she was about to destroy her entire family's legacy with a single racist gesture. The question hanging in the air wasn't whether Victoria would follow through with her planned humiliation. The question was whether she had any idea who she was about to humiliate. Victoria's heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached the Pentagon official's table. Her wine glass caught the light, the red liquid swirling like a storm waiting to break. She'd been watching this scene unfold all evening, and now it was time to correct what she saw as a fundamental error. "Excuse me," she announced loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I believe there's been some confusion with tonight's seating arrangements." The conversation stopped. 5 pairs of eyes looked up at her. 3 Pentagon officials, 2 tech executives, and Damon Richardson. The weight of their collective attention only fueled Victoria's confidence. "I'm Victoria Whitmore," she continued, as if her name should explain everything. "Whitmore Industries. We've been partners with the Department of Defense for over 70 years. My great-grandfather built the ammunition that won World War II. One of the Pentagon officials, a stern woman with silver hair and colonel's insignia, nodded politely. "Mrs. Whitmore, good to see you this evening." Victoria smiled, but her eyes remained fixed on Damon like a predator sizing up prey. "I couldn't help but notice that someone seemed to be sitting at the wrong table. The VIP section is typically reserved for actual defense contractors and military leadership, not," she paused dramatically, "charity cases." The air grew thick with tension. Phones discreetly emerged from purses and jacket pockets across the ballroom. Social media was always hungry for drama, especially when it involved Silicon Valley's elite behaving badly. Damon looked up calmly, his hands folded on the table. "I believe my invitation specified table 12. Is there a problem, ma'am?" "Your invitation?" Victoria's voice dripped with skepticism. "May I ask who sponsored your attendance tonight? Because I'm looking at this table and I see real military brass, real business leaders, and then—" She gestured vaguely at Damon. "You." "The Defense Innovation Unit extended the invitation," Damon replied simply, his tone remaining level despite the obvious provocation. Victoria's eyebrows raised. She knew the DIU. They were the Pentagon's new tech initiative, the group responsible for modernizing military technology. But that didn't explain why this man was sitting with the decision-makers instead of networking with the other diversity hires. "I see. And what company do you represent? Which government program put you here?" "I'm here in my capacity as—" "Let me guess," Victoria interrupted, her voice growing louder as nearby tables turned to watch. "Some diversity contractor trying to get a piece of the real player's pie? A community outreach program designed to make the Pentagon look more inclusive?" The tech executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the kind of networking conversation they'd expected at a charity gala. "Actually, ma'am, I'm here to evaluate potential partners for our next major defense initiative," Damon said quietly, his military bearing becoming more apparent as Victoria's attacks intensified. Victoria laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that carried across the ballroom like breaking glass. "Evaluate? You? That's absolutely rich. What exactly are your qualifications for evaluating anything in the defense sector? Did you take some kind of online course?" "Ma'am, perhaps we should return to our previous conversation," one of the Pentagon officials began, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was heading. "No," Victoria cut him off with a wave of her manicured hand. "I think it's important that we address this directly. Too many unqualified people have been getting opportunities they haven't earned simply because of the color of their skin. It's not fair to companies like mine that have actually put in the work, that have actually earned our place at tables like this." A hush began to fall over the surrounding tables. Conversations slowed, then stopped entirely as people turned to watch what was clearly becoming a public spectacle. Margaret, Victoria's closest friend, appeared at her shoulder. "Victoria, darling, maybe we should—" "No, Margaret, someone needs to put this in perspective." Victoria's voice rose another octave, ensuring that even the tables across the ballroom could hear every word. "I've been watching him all evening, schmoozing with important people, acting like he belongs here, like he's earned the right to sit with actual decision-makers. Well, I have news for you. Damon stood up slowly, maintaining eye contact with Victoria. He was taller than she'd expected, his posture unmistakably military, his presence commanding in a way that should have given her pause. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think there may be some misunderstanding about—" "Don't you dare interrupt me!" Victoria snapped, pointing a finger at his chest. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to? My family has been serving this country since before you people even had the right to vote, before you people were allowed in the same buildings as real Americans." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Even Margaret gasped. "Victoria, please!" James Whitmore's voice carried from across the room as he began pushing through the crowd, having finally noticed his wife's public meltdown. "No, James, stay back. Someone needs to say what everyone else is thinking." Victoria grabbed her wine glass with both hands, raising it above her head like a weapon. "I'm tired of pretending that diversity quotas and affirmative action create actual qualifications. I'm tired of watching undeserving people take seats that belong to families like mine." Security guards began moving toward the table from multiple directions, but they were still 20 feet away, navigating through a crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle. "Get this monkey away from my table," Victoria declared, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "You people need to learn your place, and your place isn't here, pretending to be something you're not." The crystal glass tilted. Red wine cascaded over Damon's head in a perfect arc, soaking his hair, streaming down his face, staining his navy suit jacket. The liquid splashed onto the white tablecloth like spilled blood, creating an abstract pattern of humiliation. "Did you really think you belonged here?" Victoria set the empty glass down with a sharp clink, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Did you really think anyone was fooled by your little charade?" The ballroom had gone completely silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused midway to every mouth. 300 of the most powerful people in America watched in stunned horror as Victoria Whitmore delivered what she believed to be the defining moment of her social standing. Damon Richardson stood there, wine dripping from his chin, and did something Victoria didn't expect. He smiled, not a bitter smile, not an angry smile, a knowing smile. The kind of smile you give someone who has just made a catastrophic mistake and doesn't realize it yet. "Interesting choice, Mrs. Whitmore," he said quietly, pulling a handkerchief from his jacket pocket. He dabbed at the wine with the same calm precision he might use to polish his shoes. Very revealing. Security approached from two directions, but Damon held up a hand. "That won't be necessary, gentlemen. Mrs. Whitmore was just expressing her opinion about military contracting qualifications and racial hierarchies." "Sir, are you certain? We can escort her." "No need." Damon continued dabbing at the wine stains methodically. "I think Mrs. Whitmore has made her position quite clear. This has been very educational." Victoria basked in what she perceived as total victory. Around her, several society friends nodded approvingly. This was how you handled people who didn't know their place. This was how you maintained order. "I'm glad we could clear that up," Victoria announced to the room, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Sometimes direct communication is the only way to address these awkward situations." But something was wrong. The Pentagon officials weren't applauding. They looked absolutely horrified. The tech executives were staring at Victoria like she'd just announced her plans to join a terrorist organization. And James Whitmore was pushing through the crowd with the expression of a man watching his house burn down. "Victoria?" James reached the table, his face completely pale. "What have you done?" "What needed to be done?" Victoria replied confidently, still riding high on her perceived triumph. "I made sure everyone understands the proper hierarchy here. I defended our family's reputation." James looked at Damon, who was still calmly cleaning wine from his jacket. "Sir, I am so incredibly sorry. My wife didn't mean—" "Your wife meant exactly what she said, Mr. Whitmore," Damon interrupted gently, folding his wine-stained handkerchief. "Character assessments are often most accurate when people believe there are no consequences for their actions." James's face went completely white. "Character assessments?" Damon straightened his tie and looked directly at James with the kind of measured authority that made hardened soldiers stand at attention. "It's been an illuminating evening, Mr. Whitmore. I think we've learned everything we need to know about Whitmore Industries' corporate culture and leadership philosophy." He turned to leave, but paused at Victoria's shoulder. "Some mistakes can't be undone, Mrs. Whitmore. I hope the wine was worth it." As Damon walked away with military precision, phones across the ballroom were already uploading videos to social media. #Winegate was about to trend worldwide. Victoria stood there triumphant and oblivious, having no idea that she'd just ended her family's 70-year defense contracting legacy with a single racist gesture. The question wasn't whether she'd crossed a line. The question was whether the Whitmore family would survive what came next. By 6 a.m. the next morning, Victoria Whitmore had become the most hated woman in America. The videos were everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, every platform was flooded with footage of her wine-pouring tantrum. The hashtag #WineGate was trending #1 worldwide, ahead of a celebrity divorce and a natural disaster. But it wasn't just the incident itself that had people furious. It was Victoria's follow-up performance. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down, hard. Her Instagram post, uploaded at 2 a.m. while James begged her to delete it, read, "Sometimes you have to stand up for what's right. Real Americans shouldn't have to apologize for defending our values and our institutions. #Truth Matters, #Real Talk, #No Apologies." The comments section exploded. 30,000 responses in 4 hours, 90% of them calling for boycotts of Whitmore Industries. Screenshots of her post were being shared faster than wildfire, each one generating more outrage. Meanwhile, something strange was happening to Whitmore Industries' stock price. James stood in his home office at 7 a.m., watching the pre-market numbers with growing horror. Down 8%, down 12%. Down 15%. The algorithm traders were dumping Whitmore stock like it was radioactive waste. His phone buzzed with text messages from board members. Angry investors, panicked executives, everyone wanted to know the same thing. What the hell was Victoria thinking? But James didn't have an answer, because honestly, he had no idea who Damon Richardson actually was. "Get me everything you can find on that man from last night," James told his assistant. "Full background check, employment history, social media, everything." 3 hours later, the report came back, and it was virtually empty. Damon Richardson appeared to be a ghost. No LinkedIn profile, no Facebook account, no Twitter. The most sophisticated private investigation firm in Silicon Valley had found almost nothing about him beyond basic public records. Born in Detroit. I graduated from West Point. Military service. That was it. "This doesn't make sense," James muttered, staring at the 2-page report. "Nobody has this little digital footprint. Not in 2024. His assistant shifted nervously. "Sir, there might be a reason for that. People with classified clearances sometimes have scrubbed online presences. Military intelligence, CIA, NSA. James felt his stomach drop. "You think he's the government?" "I think," his assistant said carefully, "we should probably figure that out before your wife does any more interviews." But it was too late. Victoria was already on a local news show defending her actions with the kind of righteous indignation usually reserved for war crimes tribunals. "I stand by what I did," she told the news anchor, her chin raised defiantly. "That man was clearly out of place. Someone had to address the elephant in the room. These diversity programs are getting out of hand, and real Americans are tired of pretending otherwise." The interview went viral immediately, not in a good way. James's phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he'd never seen before, but somehow knew was important. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Colonel Patricia Hayes, Pentagon Personnel Office. We need to schedule an urgent meeting regarding your defense contracts." James's blood turned to ice water. "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where you come to us, Mr. Whitmore. Today, 2 o'clock. "Can you tell me what this is regarding?" "Last night's incident involving General Richardson." The line went dead. James stared at his phone, replaying the conversation in his head. General Richardson. General. The man his wife had called a monkey and drenched in wine was a general. James tried calling Victoria, but she was still doing media appearances. Local news, podcasts, YouTube channels, anyone who would give her a platform to explain why she was actually the victim in this situation. "She's completely lost her mind," James told his brother Michael, Whitmore Industries' chief operating officer. "Do you understand what this means? If that man is really a general, if he has any influence over defense contracts?" Michael's face was grim. "I've been monitoring our accounts all morning. 3 major subcontractors have already called to reassess their partnerships with us. The Aurora Group canceled their meeting next week, and Boeing's procurement team wants to discuss alternative supply chain options." The ripple effects were spreading faster than either brother had anticipated. In the defense contracting world, reputation was everything. Contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars depended on trust, reliability, and character. Victoria had just demonstrated that Whitmore Industries possessed none of those qualities. By noon, the story had been picked up by CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC. Victoria's face was plastered across every major news website in America. The woman who had poured wine on a black man at a charity gala. What none of them knew yet was that the black man wasn't just anyone. He was the person who controlled $50 billion in annual defense spending. And at exactly 2 p.m., James Whitmore was about to learn that his wife had just committed corporate suicide in front of 300 witnesses. The question was no longer whether Whitmore Industries would recover from Victoria's racist outburst. The question was whether there would be Whitmore Industries left to recover. At exactly 2 p.m., James Whitmore walked into the Pentagon's most secure conference room and came face to face with his worst nightmare. The man sitting at the head of the table wore a perfectly pressed military uniform decorated with more stars than James could count. The same man who had wine dripping from his face 12 hours earlier was now clearly, unmistakably in complete control of this room. General Damon Richardson, United States Army. James felt the blood drain from his face as the pieces clicked into place, the calm composure under Victoria's attack. The military bearing, the way Pentagon officials had deferred to him at the gala. It all made horrible, devastating sense. "Please sit down, Mr. Whitmore," General Richardson said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to commanding thousands of soldiers. "We have quite a bit to discuss." James sat down heavily, his legs suddenly unable to support him. "General Richardson, I need you to know that my wife's behavior last night was completely unacceptable, racist, a perfect demonstration of your company's corporate culture." General Richardson folded his hands on the table. "I agree completely." The other people in the room introduced themselves. Colonel Patricia Hayes from Pentagon Personnel, Secretary of Defense Liaison Amanda Carter, and 2 officials from the Defense Innovation Unit. All of them had witnessed the previous night's spectacle either in person or through the viral videos. "Let me explain something to you, Mr. Whitmore," General Richardson began. "The Defense Innovation Unit doesn't just evaluate technical capabilities when selecting contractors. We evaluate character, leadership, the kind of people we're trusting with billions of taxpayer dollars and our soldiers' lives." James nodded desperately. "Of course, General. That makes perfect sense. Last night, I was conducting what we call a cultural assessment of several potential partners for our next major UAV initiative, a $1.2 billion contract for autonomous drone systems." James's heart stopped. The UAV contract, the one that would save Whitmore Industries. General Richardson continued, his tone remaining perfectly professional. "Whitmore Industries was actually our top choice going into last night. Your technical specifications were impressive. Your pricing was competitive. Your track record with previous contracts was exemplary." Was past tense. "But character matters, Mr. Whitmore. When we're selecting partners, we need to know how they'll treat their employees, their subcontractors, their fellow Americans. We need to know what kind of values they represent." On the table in front of James, General Richardson placed a tablet showing Victoria's viral videos. The wine-pouring scene played on loop, followed by her morning news interviews where she doubled down on her racism. "Your wife called me a monkey, Mr. Whitmore, in front of 300 witnesses. Then she spent the morning on television defending those views." James wanted to disappear into the floor. "General, Victoria doesn't speak for the company. She has no official role in... She's the primary shareholder's wife. She represents your family's values. And based on what I witnessed, I have to assume those values extend to your corporate culture." Colonel Hayes leaned forward. "We've been reviewing your employment practices, Mr. Whitmore. The demographics of your leadership team, your diversity initiatives, or lack thereof." Secretary Carter opened a folder. "In the past 5 years, Whitmore Industries has been involved in 3 discrimination lawsuits. 2 settled out of court. 1 found evidence of a hostile work environment for minority employees." James felt like he was drowning. "Those cases were isolated incidents. We've made significant improvements. Have you?" General Richardson's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Because last night suggested otherwise." Now came the real revelation. General Richardson stood up and walked to a wall-mounted screen. "Let me tell you who I am, Mr. Whitmore. I enlisted in the Army as a private 25 years ago, served 3 tours in Afghanistan, earned my commission in the field, rose through the ranks despite facing exactly the kind of treatment your wife demonstrated last night." Images flashed on the screen. A young Damon Richardson in basic training. Combat photos from Afghanistan, awards ceremonies. Each image showed his progression from enlisted soldier to commissioned officer to general. I've been called every racial slur you can imagine by people who thought they were better than me. People who assumed I didn't belong. People who believed that the color of my skin determined my capabilities. James watched in growing horror as the presentation continued. I now oversee the Defense Innovation Unit's annual budget of $50 billion. I personally approve or reject every major technology contract the Pentagon awards, including the UAV initiative that would have saved your company. The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Every person who ever underestimated me because of my race gave me valuable information about their character. But your wife's performance last night was particularly educational. General Richardson returned to his seat. She didn't just reveal her own prejudices, she revealed what kind of environment Whitmore Industries cultivates, what kind of leadership you tolerate, what kind of values do you represent. James finally found his voice. General, please, you have to understand, Victoria was drinking. She was stressed about the company's financial situation. She's not normally— Mr. Whitmore, General Richardson interrupted. Alcohol doesn't create racism, it reveals it. Stress doesn't generate prejudice. It exposes what was already there. Colonel Hayes spoke up. The UAV contract has been awarded to Northrop Grumman. The decision was finalized this morning. James felt the world collapse around him. $1.2 billion. Gone. The contract that would have saved Whitmore Industries handed to their biggest competitor. Furthermore, Secretary Carter added, we're conducting a comprehensive review of all existing Whitmore Industries contracts. Any evidence of discriminatory practices or cultural problems will result in immediate termination. James realized he was witnessing the complete destruction of his family's 70-year legacy, all because his wife couldn't control her racism for one evening. There is one thing you can do, General Richardson said quietly. James looked up hopefully. Anything, please. Fire your wife. Remove her from any connection to Whitmore Industries. Implement comprehensive diversity training for your entire leadership team. Create a genuine cultural change program with external oversight, and issue a public apology that demonstrates actual understanding of why her behavior was wrong. James nodded frantically. Yes, absolutely. Whatever it takes. But understand this, Mr. Whitmore, even if you do everything I've suggested, it won't restore the UAV contract. That's gone forever. This is about whether Whitmore Industries has any future at all in defense contracting. As James left the Pentagon that afternoon, he understood that his wife hadn't just embarrassed herself at a charity gala. She had committed corporate homicide. The question now was whether he could save anything from the wreckage of Victoria's racist meltdown, and whether he was willing to choose his company over his wife. James Whitmore sat in his car outside the Pentagon for 20 minutes staring at his phone. Victoria had called him 17 times during his meeting. 17 missed calls from the woman who had just destroyed everything their family had built over 3 generations. When he finally drove home, he found Victoria in their living room surrounded by camera equipment and lighting rigs. She was giving another interview, this one to a right-wing podcast host who was treating her like a folk hero. What people don't understand, Victoria was saying into the microphone, is that I was standing up for American values, for merit over political correctness. Someone had to say what everyone else was thinking. James stood in the doorway, watching his wife dig their grave deeper with every word. My family has been defending this country for 70 years, Victoria continued. We've earned our place at those tables through blood, sweat, and sacrifice, not through diversity quotas or affirmative action programs. The podcast host nodded enthusiastically. So you have no regrets about your actions? None whatsoever. I'd do it again tomorrow. James turned off the recording equipment. Victoria, we need to talk. Now. James, perfect timing. I was just explaining to Marcus here about how— Get out! James's voice carried a fury that made the podcast host jump. Everyone out, now! The crew scrambled to pack their equipment, sensing the impending explosion. Victoria watched them leave with confusion. James, what's wrong? The interview was going perfectly. Do you want to know who you poured wine on last night? James's voice was deadly quiet. Some diversity hire who got above his station. I already told you. General Damon Richardson, head of the Defense Innovation Unit, the man who controls $50 billion in military contracts annually. Victoria's face went blank. What? The man you called a monkey. The man you humiliated in front of 300 witnesses. He's a general in the United States Army, Victoria, and he was evaluating us for the UAV contract. The color drained from Victoria's face. That's impossible. He was just sitting there like what? Like he belonged there? He did belong there, Victoria, more than you did, more than I did. He outranks every person in that room. Victoria sank into her chair as the full scope of her mistake began to dawn on her. The UAV contract, gone. $1.2 billion, awarded to Northrop Grumman this morning. But surely if we explain what? That my wife is a racist who attacks black generals at charity galas. That Whitmore Industries is run by people who think the color of someone's skin determines their worth? Victoria's shock was quickly replaced by defensive anger. I am not a racist. I was protecting our family's interests. By calling a decorated war hero a monkey? I didn't know he was... It shouldn't matter what he was, James exploded. You don't treat people like that regardless of their rank or position, but you're so blinded by your prejudice that you can't see past skin color. The argument was interrupted by James's phone buzzing. Emergency board meeting, called by Victoria's own father. Richard Whitmore, the company's founder and chairman, had seen the videos. 2 hours later, the Whitmore Industries boardroom was packed with the most powerful people in the defense contracting industry. Victoria's father sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone. Victoria, Richard said quietly, explain to me what you were thinking. Victoria tried to summon her earlier confidence, but facing her father and the board felt different than facing podcast hosts and right-wing media. Daddy, I was defending our family's reputation. That man was clearly out of place. That man, interrupted board member Patricia Collins, was General Damon Richardson. I served under him in Afghanistan. He's one of the most respected officers in the military. Victoria's face went white. Another board member, former Secretary of Defense William Hayes, leaned forward. Do you have any idea what you've done to this company's reputation? We've already received calls from 15 major clients questioning their partnerships with us. This is a temporary setback, Victoria protested. Once people understand the full context, Richard Whitmore said slowly, is that my daughter publicly humiliated a black general while using racial slurs. The full context is that she's spent the last 18 hours defending her actions on national television. Collins opened a laptop. Let's review the evidence. The boardroom screen filled with social media posts. Victoria's Twitter account, her Instagram story, her morning news interviews. Each one showed her doubling down on her racist behavior, refusing to apologize, claiming she was the real victim. Victoria Whitmore stands by her actions. One news headline read, Billionaire's wife defends racial incident, read another. She called him an animal, Collins said flatly, on camera in front of Pentagon officials. Victoria tried one more defense. I was protecting American values. American values? Her father's voice was ice cold. Is racism an American value, Victoria? Is humiliating our military heroes an American value? The room fell silent. Then Collins spoke up. We've been contacted by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They're opening an investigation into Whitmore Industries' workplace culture. Hayes added, the Pentagon has initiated a comprehensive review of all our existing contracts. Any evidence of discriminatory practices could result in immediate termination. Victoria's mother, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. Victoria, dear, you need to understand what you've done. You haven't just embarrassed yourself. You've destroyed 3 generations of work. I can fix this, Victoria said desperately. I'll apologize, It's too late for apologies, Richard said. The damage is done. The question now is how we save what's left of this company. Collins pulled up financial data. Stock price is down 32% since yesterday. We've lost 4 major subcontracts. Boeing is reassessing their partnership with us. Hayes continued the devastating news. Lockheed Martin canceled next week's negotiations. Raytheon is exploring alternative suppliers. Victoria's father stood up slowly. By the authority vested in me as chairman of this board, I am removing Victoria Whitmore from all positions within Whitmore Industries effective immediately. Daddy, you can't. I can and I am. Furthermore, her trust fund is frozen pending a full investigation of her actions and their impact on company assets. The other board members voted unanimously to support the decision. Victoria's mother continued. Your behavior has been a pattern, Victoria. We've ignored it for too long. The way you treat service workers, employees, anyone you consider beneath you. It stops now. Collins opened another file. We found additional incidents. A wrongful termination lawsuit from 2019 involving a black employee who claimed Victoria created a hostile work environment. She settled out of court for $200,000. More evidence emerged. Employee complaints that had been buried, discrimination allegations that had been quietly handled by HR, a pattern of racist behavior that went back years. The general didn't just see one incident, Hayes explained. He saw who you really are, and he made his decision accordingly. Victoria looked around the room desperately. These were people who had known her since childhood. Family, friends, business partners, all of them were staring at her like she was a stranger. "Please," she whispered. "This is my family's company, too." Richard Whitmore's voice was final. "Your actions have shown that you don't understand what family means. You don't understand what honor means. You certainly don't understand what leadership means." James had remained silent through the entire meeting, but now he spoke up. "I've filed for divorce. The papers will be served tomorrow." Victoria stared at her husband in shock. "James? I won't let you destroy what's left of this company, or what's left of our reputation." As the board meeting ended, Victoria found herself completely alone, stripped of her position, her income, her trust fund, and her marriage, all because she couldn't control her racism for one evening. But the worst was yet to come. Because while Victoria was being systematically dismantled by her own family, General Richardson was implementing changes that would affect the entire defense contracting industry. The question wasn't just whether Victoria would survive her downfall. The question was whether her actions would change how America chooses its military partners forever. 6 weeks later, Victoria Whitmore stood in front of a federal courthouse, reading from a prepared statement that her court-appointed lawyer had written. The woman who had once commanded respect at charity galas now looked hollow, defeated, wearing a discount suit from Target instead of designer couture. "I want to publicly apologize to General Damon Richardson for my inexcusable behavior," she read, her voice barely audible over the crowd of protesters behind her. "My actions were wrong, hurtful, and do not represent the values that America stands for." The words sounded hollow. Everyone could tell she was reading from a script, forced into this humiliation by her legal team's plea bargain agreement. The comments on the live stream were brutal but justified. "Too little, too late. She's only sorry she got caught. This isn't remorse. This is damage control." General Richardson had been invited to respond, but he chose grace over revenge. Standing outside the Pentagon that same afternoon, he addressed the media with the same calm authority that had impressed Victoria's victims. "Mrs. Whitmore's apology is noted," he said simply. "But this case was never about personal grudges. It was about ensuring that our military partners share our values of respect, dignity, and equal treatment for all Americans." His response went viral for all the right reasons. Here was a man who had faced racism his entire career, who had been publicly humiliated, who could have demanded blood, and instead chose to focus on systemic change. The real reckoning was happening inside Whitmore Industries. James Whitmore had spent the last month implementing the most comprehensive cultural transformation in corporate history. Every employee underwent mandatory bias training. The entire leadership team was restructured. New policies were created with input from civil rights organizations. "We're not just changing policies," James announced to his remaining employees. "We're changing who we are as a company." The board had hired Dr. Maya Johnson, a renowned diversity consultant, to oversee the transformation. Her first report was damning. Whitmore Industries had a documented pattern of racial discrimination going back 15 years. Victoria's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. It was the visible symptom of a rotten corporate culture. But James was determined to rebuild from the ground up. Meanwhile, Victoria's personal reckoning was just beginning. The divorce proceedings had stripped her of everything. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed 20 years earlier, confident in her family's wealth, now ensured she left the marriage with almost nothing. James kept the house, the company shares, even their joint art collection. Victoria moved into a studio apartment in Oakland, working part-time at a non-profit organization as part of her court-mandated community service. 200 hours of serving meals to homeless people, many of them Black and Latino individuals she would have previously dismissed as undeserving. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. For the first time in her life, Victoria was forced to confront the humanity of people she'd spent decades dehumanizing. She served meals to a veteran who'd lost his leg in Afghanistan. She helped a single mother fill out job applications. She listened to stories of discrimination, poverty, and resilience that challenged everything she'd believed about merit and privilege. Slowly, painfully, something began to change in her worldview. But the real transformation was happening at the institutional level. General Richardson used Victoria's case as a catalyst for Defense Department reform. The Pentagon announced new character assessment protocols for all major contractors. Companies would now be evaluated not just on technical capabilities, but on their workplace culture, leadership values, and commitment to equality. Technical excellence means nothing if it comes wrapped in hatred, General Richardson explained to Congress. Our military fights for American values. Our contractors must embody those same values. The policy changes rippled through the entire defense industry. Companies began firing executives with histories of discrimination. Diversity initiatives stopped being cosmetic and became operational requirements. The old boys network that had dominated military contracting for decades suddenly found itself under unprecedented scrutiny. Victoria's racist outburst had accidentally triggered the most significant civil rights advancement in military contracting since the 1960s. Other government agencies began adopting similar protocols. The Department of Energy, Transportation, Education, Victoria's moment of unveiled hatred was becoming the foundation for systemic change across the federal government. Whitmore Industries, meanwhile, was slowly rebuilding its reputation. The company that had lost $2.8 billion in contracts was now being held up as a model for corporate transformation. James's willingness to choose principles over profit, to sacrifice his marriage for his company's soul, had earned grudging respect from industry leaders. Sometimes you have to burn everything down to build something better, James told Forbes magazine in his first interview since the scandal. Victoria's actions forced us to confront truths we'd been avoiding for decades. The interview revealed that Whitmore Industries was now majority minority owned. Its leadership team reflected America's diversity, and its workplace culture had become a benchmark for inclusion in the defense sector. Victoria's racist attack on a black general had backfired so spectacularly that it actually advanced racial justice by decades. But for Victoria herself, the reckoning was far from over. As she served meals in Oakland, filed paperwork in San Francisco, and slowly began to understand the damage her privilege and prejudice had caused, one question haunted her. Was redemption possible for someone who had weaponized hatred so completely? The answer would determine not just her future, but the future of accountability in America. 1 year later, Victoria Whitmore stood in that same homeless shelter in Oakland, but everything had changed. She wasn't there for court-mandated community service anymore. She was there as a volunteer, arriving early and staying late, her hands rough from months of honest work. The designer manicures were gone. The entitled smirk had disappeared. Something fundamental had shifted in her soul. "Miss Victoria," called out Marcus, an elderly black veteran she'd served meals to for months. "You got those job applications ready for tomorrow's workshop?" Victoria nodded, organizing paperwork with the same attention to detail she'd once reserved for charity gala seating charts. But now that precision served people who actually needed help, not people who wanted to be seen helping. The woman who had once called a black general a monkey now spent her days helping homeless veterans navigate the same bureaucracy that had failed them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Victoria herself. Meanwhile, the changes her racist outburst had triggered continued rippling through American society. General Richardson's character assessment protocols had been adopted by 17 federal agencies. Over 300 defense contractors had implemented comprehensive bias training. The defense industry had gone from 12% minority leadership to 38% in just 1 year. Whitmore Industries, now under James's transformed leadership, had won back several major contracts by becoming the most diverse and inclusive company in their sector. The company Victoria had nearly destroyed was now thriving specifically because they'd rejected everything she represented. Victoria's mother, Eleanor, visited the shelter one afternoon. She watched her daughter serve meals, organize job fairs, and treat every person with the dignity Victoria had spent decades denying them. "I'm proud of you," Eleanor said quietly as they walked to Victoria's beat-up Honda Civic. "Not proud of what you did, but proud of who you're becoming." Victoria looked back at the shelter. "I destroyed everything, Mom. Our family's reputation, the company, my marriage. I hurt so many people." "Yes, you did," Eleanor agreed. "But you also accidentally created something powerful. You forced America to confront its own prejudices. Sometimes change requires a catalyst, even an ugly one. Victoria had lost her fortune, her status, her marriage, and her old life. But in losing everything, she'd found something she'd never possessed: genuine purpose. The real measure of accountability isn't just punishment, it's transformation. Victoria's journey from racist billionaire's wife to dedicated social worker proved that even the most privileged, prejudiced person could change if they were willing to do the hard work of examining their own hatred. General Richardson, now promoted to 4-star general, had used Victoria's attack as a foundation for military reform that would protect future generations of soldiers from discrimination. Her moment of unveiled racism had accidentally advanced civil rights by decades. James Whitmore had rebuilt his company's culture from the ground up, proving that corporate America could choose values over profit and still succeed. Victoria herself had learned that true worth comes not from the color of your skin, your family's wealth, or your social status, but from how you treat other human beings when you think nobody important is watching. The question that started this story was simple. Have you ever seen someone's arrogance backfire so spectacularly that it changed the course of history itself? The answer is that sometimes the most powerful social justice comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the people who reveal society's deepest problems also become the catalyst for solving them. What would you do if you had General Richardson's authority? How would you use your power to create change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of accountability and transformation inspired you, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about justice, redemption, and the power of standing up for what's right. Because in the end, change happens when good people refuse to stay silent, and when bad people are forced to face the consequences of their choices. Thank you for reading.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.